Hi, this is Ann Bijur. I work for the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and you'll hear more about me and my connection to wasted food in a few minutes.
Okay, and I'm Theron Lay-Sleeper. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. We are in week 2 of our sustainability series. This is a series of webinars based on learning skills to help you be more sustainable, whether it's recycling or using your food to greater effect. And this is all made possible by some funding from the USDA Rural Utilities Service. I want to thank them. And we've got Ann Bijur from the Agency of Natural Resources, and we also have Chef Jim McCarthy with us from the mill. And so we're excited to talk to you a little bit today about how to use your food more effectively and reduce waste in the kitchen.
So you ready for me?
I'm ready for you. Let's start out with Ann's presentation, and we will learn a little bit about reducing food waste.
Well, hi everybody, welcome, and thanks so much for coming to the Re-Cook Café. So as I said before, I work for the Agency of Natural Resources in the Waste Management and Prevention Division, actually within the Department of Environmental Conservation. And my role is to provide education and outreach about Vermont's Universal Recycling Law, or Act 148, if you've heard of it by that name. So the Universal Recycling Law was passed in 2012 with 2 major goals. And the primary goal is just to reduce Vermont's overall trash bag, so how much waste we generate. And then the second goal within that is to increase the amount that we're recycling and composting. So trying to get some of that waste out of that trash bag and into better uses. So as a state, we've been really focused on reducing recycling contamination and helping folks to compost. And I've been wanting us to focus more on waste reduction. So after learning more about the enormity of the food waste problem, I contacted Jim, who I knew from a previous job, and I knew he was also really interested in reducing wasted food, and we developed this workshop. And we've given it 3 times in person. The last time was about a year ago, like just as COVID was coming at our heels. It was the last in-person event I've done. And then we have done one other virtual workshop. And so we're still trying to figure out what works best in this new normal. So we'd love to hear your feedback and to know which parts are most effective as we keep trying different things and different ways to reach people. So every good cafe needs a menu. And I'm gonna start off with just a brief overview of the problem, how much food is being wasted, why waste happens, and why you should even care. And then I'll just briefly touch on the strategies to reduce wasted food. And then I'll pass things over to Jim, and he's gonna teach you how to cook some delicious food. And then we should have time at the end for questions and answers. So I hope you had a chance to take a look at this love letter to food video that Theron sent out in the initial email. And if you didn't, I'd encourage you to go check it out afterwards. It's only about 3 minutes long. And the reason why I showed it to you or shared it with you is that studies show that people won't change their behavior unless they feel an emotional connection to a problem or a solution. So the video, the love letter to food, does a really great job of showing the importance of food to our health and our survival. But it also talks about why we should put a higher value on foods because of all the resources that go into growing them. And, you know, I think most of us, and probably especially most of us on this webinar, do love food. And we don't want to waste the things we love. So this is an opportunity to learn how to value it more and not to waste it. Okay, so how much food is actually being wasted? In the US, up to 40% of food grown is never eaten. It's just a wild statistic. And how do we know that? The Natural Resources Defense Council produced this report in 2012 called Wasted, and that sparked this national conversation about food waste and its consequences. So 40% food uneaten averages about 400 pounds per person per year. So we waste about an average of 1 pound a person a day. So it's a really unfortunate statistic, and it's expensive. If you remember from that first slide, the average family of 4 wastes about $1,500 to about $1,800 a year on food that's never eaten. And that translates to an annual cost of $218 billion. Okay, so then piled on this waste is another tragedy, hunger. And that is something that I think many of us during COVID have become more aware of in our own communities and nationally. So this is not to say that solving the food waste problem will solve the hunger problem, but one of the most positive outcomes of the universal recycling law is that the Vermont Food Bank has seen an increase in fresh foods donated by food retailers. And so I think I forgot to share this statistic, but 1 in 4 Vermonters is food insecure. And again, that may have changed because of COVID, I'm not sure. So how much food is wasted on a national basis? Almost 63 million tons of waste per year. And where does that come from? So about 52 million tons is going straight to the landfill, and then about 10 million tons is lost on farms. And normally, if I'm interacting with folks, I would ask them, can you think of why on-farm losses happen? Some of the reasons are many fruits and vegetables are never harvested because they're too big, or they're too small, or they're a weird color, or they just don't match our narrow definitions of perfection. Or the market changes and nobody's eating kale anymore, and the farmer grew all this kale. So we're really lucky in Vermont because Salvation Farms is a nonprofit that's working on this issue. And so if you have time, it'd be great if you could volunteer with them and glean, harvest some of this food that's being lost on farms. But if you don't have time to do that, you can do something about this problem every day. You can reach for that ugly vegetable in the grocery store, and then the grocers know that, okay, these things will sell, and so we'll continue to carry them. Okay, so oops. So where is this food waste generated? I just want to make sure. Okay, sorry. Where is this food waste generated? 43%, if you look at this yellow portion of this graph, 43% of food waste is coming from our homes. So that's why we're here in this workshop, and we're really excited that you guys are interested in learning how to reduce food waste. And then just the other thing I'll point out on this graph is that the lighter colors, the pink and the orange and the green, those are also areas where we as individuals and consumers are also contributing to the waste problem. So institutional and food service, that's cafeterias and schools and restaurants. So every time we are interacting with food, there's an opportunity to waste it or to do something different. So we're hoping that this workshop will spark some of those things in your lives, changes in your habits. So back to our households. What does that 43% look like in our homes? So here's a picture. In 1 month, a family of 4 wastes. If you do the math, if it's £1 pound a person a day and there's a family of 4, that's 120 pounds. So that's a lot of food. And that's, again, why it costs a family of 4 about $1,500 a year. And if you're curious, milk is the most single wasted food, and combined fruit and vegetables are the largest percentage by weight. And meat is the most expensive food that is wasted. So why is this waste happening? If you take a look at these pictures, you might get some ideas. So on the left, you see some burnt rolls. So maybe during the pandemic, during COVID, you thought you would try to learn how to bake bread, like many people did, and you weren't paying attention, and it burned. So we don't always have all the skills that we need to properly cook food, and that's something that Jim's going to talk about a little bit later. Or we also have the problem of aspirational cooking. So again, you really want to learn how to bake bread, or you want to eat healthier, so you buy all these new veggies that you've never used before, and you have all these great intentions of cooking them, and then you never get to them. So they end up, languishing in the back of your fridge. We also cook and serve portions that are too big. So this photo on the right shows a party, and the worst thing ever might be that you run out of food, but there are actually a lot of tools today online that can help you when we're ever able to entertain again. It'll help you plan how much to serve so you don't cook too much. Or if you do, have to-go containers for your guests, or tell them to bring an extra container so they can take some of it home. So some of the other reasons why waste happens is that we might be confused about date labels or have a misunderstanding about them. And again, that's something I'm going to talk about later. And then multiple people might be doing the shopping. So you're not communicating well with your spouse or your roommates. And so, you both bring home milk and eggs and, lettuce. And so you have way too much in your fridge. So there are a lot of reasons why we waste food, but there are a lot of strategies to help prevent it. And a lot of it just goes back to paying attention. So apart from this loss of money, why do we care about wasted food? Why else should we care? So wasted food equals wasted resources. So not only the financial resources that I talked about before, although you can see that all those zeros down at the bottom relate to the $218 billion of money lost nationwide. So it's not only financial resources, but it's all the natural resources that go into growing food. So even with the most sustainable practices, our food system uses a lot of an enormous amount of natural resources. If you think about the food cycle and everything that goes into growing, transporting, storing, and distributing food, that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of different things that are going into it. So, right here in the middle of this graphic, we see 19% of all US croplands. So about 20% of croplands is being wasted, is being used to grow food that we're not even eating. Same thing with the water. So 21% of our water is being used to grow food that's not even eaten. So think about all those other things, the seeds, the fertilizers, the labor, all the labor that goes into growing food. And if we don't eat it, it's just, they're used in vain. Sorry, I keep flipping quicker than I wanted to. So what can we do? We are going to talk tonight about 4 different strategies to reduce wasted food. What we like to call smart shopping and planning, storage, how to store things better for longer longevity, creative cooking using recipes, batch cooking, and then understanding those expiration dates and what do they really mean. And I like to show this poster on the left. It's a poster from World War I, just to focus on the fact that these are not new strategies. We're not asking people to do something that they've never done before. It's often things that have just been, lost or not passed down from the generations. And so we just have to kind of come back and revisit the values from that time. So, it's really just like the 3 R's for food. At first, we're going to reduce waste and then, reuse it. So don't forget about your leftovers, or if you're not going to eat it at all, don't forget about your local food shelf. And then last but not least, recycle it. I'm not going to talk about composting tonight, but hopefully you all know that part of the universal recycling law is this complete landfill ban on food scraps. So we really hope you're composting either in your backyard or bringing it to a transfer station or hiring a curbside pickup service. So the first of the strategies is smart shopping and planning. We like to say, buy what you eat, buy what you need, and then eat what you buy. So make a shopping list with just simple meals in mind. It's simpler than all-out meal planning. We're not asking everybody to plan, complicated meals every night, and you're going to cook with Jim something that's pretty simple to do just from what's in your fridge. So, but if you're not planning every single meal out, it gives you a little more flexibility too to buy what's in season. So the objective here is to check what you already have. So we call it shopping your kitchen first. So consider also consider how many meals you're going to eat at home before you go shopping next, and buy accordingly. So some tips along the way are: don't go to the grocery store hungry. Buy ingredients that can be used for multiple recipes that week. So you might want to get a whole bunch of peppers and onions and mushrooms, saute them up, and then they could be used in an omelet or in enchiladas, or as a side dish. Some of the other tips are to beware of sales and bulk purchasing, because it's only a good deal if you're actually going to use it all. Like if you have, 8 containers of chicken broth in your pantry, that's just not a good use of space, and they could go bad if they stay there too long. So then schedule a lazy night. You might not cook dinner out every night, and so maybe only plan a few nights worth of meals, and then you'll have the opportunity to shop your fridge and eat leftovers for one of those other nights. So just to review, the strategy focuses only on buying the quantities you need until the next shopping trip. One other thing is to be aware of what you're putting in your cart, so you're not just going on autopilot. And then if folks do or are interested in meal planning services, there are some websites out there, and I can share those resources later. So one of the other strategies we talk about is just eating what needs to be eaten first. So you want to be mindful of old ingredients and leftovers that you need to use up first. So you might want to use this visual cue. You can print out an eat first sign on the savethefood.com website, or get some little basket or something like that in the picture, and make sure you're bringing all those kind of foods up to the front of your fridge so you see them, and other folks in your household see them first, and they know that when they're hungry, they should go there first. And it helps avoid all those things that get stuck in the back of that crowded refrigerator and end up getting moldy. So the next strategy is just proper storage, learning where and how to store your foods. So when you go shopping, if you really like avocados and they're hard as rock, store them at first on the counter. But once they get soft, if you're not going to eat them right away, stick them in the fridge, and that'll buy you another couple of days. And then this picture of cilantro was from an article I read about a person who did a little experiment on different ways of storing the herbs, and those are all the same age. So depending on how she stored them, they lasted much longer. And so the ones on the left that looked the nicest, those were stored in, you want to put the stems in a little bit of water in a container, and then put a plastic bag over the top to kind of give it its own little microcosm, and then it'll last the longest. So we're also going to share some handouts later on with many more tips, because I'm going to keep going through these pretty quickly so we can get to the cooking part. So the other part of storing, smart storage, is just don't forget about using your freezer. It can buy you much more time, even with things like milk. If you know you're not going to eat it and you're going away, stick it in your freezer. The way I use my freezer the most is probably with fruits like bananas. I just stick them in the freezer and use them in smoothies later. And then one tip is if you have like a full lasagna that you're going to freeze, don't forget to cut it up first, because you don't want to be hacking at it later to try to get the size that you want. And then when you're freezing things, make sure to leave a little bit of space, especially liquids, for the liquids to expand when they're freezing. And don't forget to label them with the date, so you remember how old things are and what you should be eating first out of your freezer. So the next strategy that Jim's really going to go into in more detail is creative cooking, and how to use up your leftovers and how to know how much to serve. So just in these pictures are some of the foods that are classic for using up whatever you have. So soups and stews. In the middle here, we have a bread pudding, and then fried rice. Some of my other favorites are omelets too. And then again, Jim's going to really go into this too, but one thing I have learned from working with him is just to be willing to go off script. I'm definitely a cook that likes to have a recipe. And so just working with him has made me realize that you can make new combinations and you might come up with something really great. And it's okay to substitute things, you know, especially if you're just cooking, not baking. Maybe that's a little bit different with baking. And then when in doubt, go to hero recipes. Like one of the things that I do now is I almost always have one of those jars of Indian sauce. And so, you know, whatever I've got in the fridge, just throw the sauce on it, cook up the veggies, and add a protein, and you've got a dinner. So one other thing I will talk about here is just using whole foods. So ditch the peeler if you can. You don't really have to peel everything. Just get a good scrubber and clean it off before you use it, because many of the nutrients are in the skin of vitamins. So then understanding expiration dates. Expiration dates are not an indication of safety. The only one that's federally regulated is for infant formula. So most of them are just manufacturer suggestions or recommendations for when a product is at its freshest. So the main point of this strategy is to trust your senses. If you find something that you're not sure if it's good or not, you know, open it up, smell it, look at it, and trust yourself. It probably is okay to eat if you think it's okay to eat. And Jim is going to go through the worksheet that you got, and we'll see how well you did in understanding which things that were spoiled are okay to eat. So, so let's see. So, because some of these things, they might look gross to you, but if you just cut off the sides, they're okay to eat. So we're going to test your knowledge. So right now I'm going to quickly stop sharing and pull up the worksheet. So if you have it and you've already filled it out, grab it. Can you guys see the worksheet? Jim,
Yep,
can you...
it's up, Ann.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce Jim, my chef and friend from the Mill Market and Deli in South Burlington.
Hi, how you guys doing? As I said, my name is Jim. I'm the chef owner of the Mill Market in South Burlington. Met Ann at Shelburne Farms when I was working there as the executive chef years ago. And that's sort of where I got into, you know, food waste and reducing our footprint on sending things to the landfill. So this sheet right here is a few of my suggestions for what to do with some of that food that may appear to be unusable. And as you can see from this, that the only thing on here that I would recommend not using would be the shredded cheese with green and mold spots throughout. That one, you don't really know where the mold is in there, so I would just toss that one. But everything else is actually safe to use in some fashion. So the blocks of cheddar, that's a really easy one. You know, if it's got a little spot on one side, just cut it off and you're good to go. Strawberries, even those ones that were on the screen earlier that were kind of moldy, you can usually, most packs of strawberries, you get one really fuzzy one in there. I would just take that one out and you can rinse the rest of them or kind of call what you see, and then use them in jams or pies. You know, just cook them down. Carrots, sometimes if you leave them in your fridge long enough, have you ever noticed, I've seen them get really even limp and even turn almost black, but if you peel the black off, you can use it in soups or anything like that. Ground meat, even if it turns slightly brown, that's not too bad. It just means it's oxidized. Definitely give it a sniff. If it smells okay, use it. Just, I would, you know, cook it through. I wouldn't use it in hamburger, you know, anything that requires rare beef, but, you know, cook it in a soup or a stew that something like we're going to use today. Eggs are something that I definitely see, you know, I've definitely turned my wife onto, you know, being able to use eggs that are well past their expiration dates. I don't even know why they expire so early. I mean, I've used eggs months past their expiration date. The only thing that happens sometimes they get a little the air pocket grows in them and they'll dry out a little bit, but they're fine to use in baking and omelets and all that stuff. Frozen meat. So it's a lot of times in your oh yeah, and you want to scroll down? I think someone.
Downward. Okay.
Frozen meats and frozen foods in general, sometimes they get a little freezer burned. It's when the moisture sort of evaporates from them in the freezer. They're still fine to use. You can, you know, use them in pot roast, coq au vin, in some of our hero recipes, and they'll be gonna be fine. Tomatoes, you know, a little bit rotten. You got some black spots on them. Just cut them off. They're good to use. Milk is another one that Anne mentioned that people tend to throw away. Use your senses on milk. Sometimes in the summer, milk will go bad faster, but I've used milk almost over a month past its expiration date, and it's still fine. I actually talked to the owner of Monument Farms and asked him why he did this. He said, you know, 17 days is industry standard. And that in the wintertime, you know, you probably get a lot longer on your milk because the cold chain is a lot greater because the milk never actually enters anywhere that's not a refrigerated state. So it'll last longer. But definitely use your senses on this one. If it smells fine, it probably is fine. So you can, you know, use it in there. And then even large cuts of meat. If you got a big roast, maybe it was exposed to the air in the refrigerator, but it sort of has a little slimy spot. You know, just cut that off and then continue using it. You know, just trim up where you are. I mean, you know, dry aged meat even utilizes the growth of bacteria on it to actually make a better thin meat, and you just shave it off. So it's definitely safe as long as it's a whole muscle piece.
Great.
Is milk okay to drink if there is solids? That just means it's starting to curdle or turn to yogurt. It's not going to be. It's not going to be harmful, but it's probably not going to be palatable at that point. So I would definitely throw that out.
So sorry, folks. I thought I was scrolled all the way down, so I hope you got to see the bottom of the worksheet. We will send this out to everybody. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And Jim, now you're on for the cooking portion.
All right, great.
Hey, so just before we start on the cooking, we in that email that we sent out at the last week and earlier this week, we asked you to, when you were shopping, to try to pick some ugly looking vegetables. And I'm going to do a poll. So if you want to all put in your answers on why you think we did that, I'll leave that poll open for a little bit. I also just want to say, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. If you have suggestions or comments, that's what the chat is for. And I will feed the panelists, Jim and Anne, these questions as they come up. All right, we've got pretty good participation on the poll. So most people got it right. The ugly vegetables are more likely to get wasted. And I mean, there are a lot of other things that are nice about the vegetables, but people are sometimes looking for the wrong thing when they're shopping for vegetables. All right, well, I will let Jim take it away with the cooking portion of this.
All right. So are you making me big screen right now? Or on the...
Yep, Jim, you're on big screen, and everybody should be able to see you in large format.
Great. All right. So yeah, I guess we're going to get into the cooking portion of the evening. For those of you following at home, I hope you guys did a little bit of prep work ahead of time, because I'm going to be going through things pretty fast. So we're not going to spend time waiting for everyone to chop vegetables. I pre-chopped all of our stuff. So the first thing we're going to get started is on our hero recipe that Ann mentioned. Hero recipes are good go-to recipes that you can kind of use a lot of stuff in your fridge. And before we go into that, I'd like to mention one thing you might notice on a lot of my recipes is that there aren't amounts of anything. It's because you really my recipes are meant to use up stuff. They're meant to be, recipes that you could sub out in and out however you want. Maybe you have some more potatoes, you're gonna put that in your hero recipe, or you've got a bag of cauliflower that you need to use up. It's really not about measuring in exact amounts, using your senses, using your taste buds to create dishes. So I'm going to get a pot started over here. I apologize if anyone in there wants me to pull the camera over to look at anything in there. I can. It's a little difficult. This is my first webinar, so I'm kind of getting used to how this all will work when I'm not in person. But so we're going to start our hero recipe, the Moroccan chickpea stew. And so I'm going to get a little oil started in there. And then I'm going to use a little beef today. Sometimes I keep this vegetarian, but I felt like since I'm going to be eating this tonight, I felt like having a little beef tonight. This is one of those great things where you can use pork, you can use lamb, you can use beef, you can leave it out and just use chickpeas. You can use different beans, whatever kind of proteins you want. You can substitute even the new fake meats that are around that are really nice. But really kind of whatever you want. I'm just going to drop in some of the beef, kind of start to brown it up. All that browning. I'm gonna go through. So I got my pre-chopped peppers and onions right here. One thing I wanted to point out, when you're going through cutting onions, doing like that, I saved this part, and I'll probably throw this stuff like this in the freezer. And then if I'm gonna go make a stock sometime, I left over chicken bones or whatever, those are stuff that I can go to. If you use fresh herbs, I'll take the stems from the fresh herbs, throw them in the same bag, and then I have like a bag of stock vegetables to kind of go in and flavor things with. It's really nice. We do a lot of that at our market as well by saving all sorts of scraps. In fact, all of our tomato ends for our deli, we save up and then those go into our marinara sauces a lot of times. That's nice and brown. I'll throw that in there. Give it a nice little stir. And then I didn't have anything too exciting to put in there. I just said, it says root vegetables, large dice. This is just some carrots. That's all I had in my fridge. I'm actually under COVID quarantine right now, so I couldn't go to the store and get anything fun ingredients. So we're going to be making a couple substitutions here and there, which is fine. But so I'm going to throw carrots in there. But this recipe does well with any sort of root vegetables. You can use rutabagas. You can throw cauliflower in there. You can throw beets in there. All those fun things that you can get in your maybe if you have a CSA in the summer, you get some weird vegetable that you don't really know what to do with. Throw it in here. This is just one type of stew that goes really well. A nice vegetarian chili, or chili is another thing that I consider a hero recipe. Or as Ann mentioned, you have an Indian simmer sauce. Just do anything like that in there. I'm also going to add some potatoes to this. I wanted to point out this one before. I didn't cut this one because this is kind of an older, ugly sweet potato that, I'm still going to use. I'm just going to cut off some of the drier parts. But other than that, the whole thing's pretty good. And then I'm just going to take it and dice it up whole. I tend to leave the skins on potatoes, carrots, anything like that. That also kind of reduces a little bit of food waste. Plus, it adds a lot more vitamins to a lot of your cooking. Even at the market for our mashed potatoes, I'll boil them skin on whole and all, and then put them through a meat grinder. So all our potatoes are kind of dirty potatoes, much healthier for you and lead to a lot less food waste. Throw that in there. Give it a nice stir. All right, once those, and then they give it a little bit of salt just to help them sweat a little bit. And then to this, I'm gonna add my chickpeas. So I'll drain these chickpeas. This is just regular old canned chickpeas. You can actually save the water for chickpeas. There's a liquid that comes off of them is actually known as aquafaba. Do a little Google online. There's tons of recipes. It's a really cool ingredient that it acts sort of like an egg white. So if you put in, Roboku or a mixer and blend it up, it'll actually whip up nice and frothy. And you can make, I've made a vegan chocolate mousse before by adding some chocolate and sugar to it. I know it sounds weird. It's actually quite good. You can make vegan macaroons with it. You can do all sorts of fun things with the aquafaba from chickpeas. So definitely don't throw that out and use it sometime. It's a neat ingredient. I'm gonna add those in there, and then I'm gonna add my tomatoes. And give that a stir. And then, depending on, I'm gonna need a little liquid in there. I'll bring it over. I'll bring the camera over. Hopefully it doesn't mess things up too much. What we got? So I'm gonna want to just barely cover that with a little bit of liquid. So probably about 1 can's worth of water. And on the recipe sheet, it says water or stock. You can use whatever you have around. It really doesn't matter. Stock's actually, it's gonna make it a little richer, but you don't always have stock around. Don't be ashamed to use a little bit of water. So yeah, that's just barely covered, and we're just gonna let that simmer now for a little bit until everything softens up. While that's going, we're gonna start on our kale stem pesto. So I've got my pasta water back here going, and we're gonna give that a little bit. We're gonna season that with salt. Now, when you season pasta water, you're gonna want to season the pasta water. Salty, almost like the sea. And don't be afraid to season your. I know a lot of people are afraid of salt. I find that by properly seasoning pasta water, you're gonna use less salt in the overall recipe because the noodles themselves will get seasoned, and you're not gonna have to add salt afterwards. So it's like if you're gonna grill a steak on, or anything like that, you're always gonna season the steak itself and not rely on a whole bunch of sauce to cover up the flavor afterwards. So always properly season your noodles.
And Jim, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. I learned from you what a real pinch is of salt, because I was just doing this lame little tiny pinch. And then I saw you do a real pinch. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong all along.
Well, yeah, some recipes, in Chester, they'll be like a 3-finger pinch or a 4-finger pinch or a 2-finger pinch. Or they're all different, All right. So I got my pasta water on. And I've got my water on. So I need to blanch some kale stems here. And I'm going to add to this. Again, I'm going to season the kale stems a little bit. So we're doing, so these kale stems, I've stripped, just kale that I stripped the leaves off of. I'm going to use a little bit of them in the pasta, but then you just use them for whatever else you might use them for. We really enjoy kale Caesar here at the house, so we always have kale stems. And then to this water, I'm going to add just a little bit of baking soda, not much. Again, I mean, a tiny pinch. That's all you'll need. What's that going to do is that's going to raise the pH, make it more basic. What that does, it actually helps when you cook it. It actually helps break down the cell walls of the kale stems. So they'll soften up a little bit more because we're going to turn it into a pesto. So we want it to almost be kind of mushy afterwards. And that'll help break down. It also keeps it a lot greener. So it's going to have a much more vibrant color after it's done. So we got that there. I guess you got to wait for that. So go back and stir it here a little bit. Oh, I gotta wait for my water to come up to a boil. So I'll talk about a few of the things that we do at the mill to prevent food waste and to prevent things overall from ending up in a landfill. As Ann was talking about earlier, best by or sell by dates are really something that aren't required to be used on anything except for baby formula. But we found that, when we were putting dates on some of our prepared food for the market, we give everything in our food. We prepare things fresh. We put it in the market. It has a shelf life of, it has probably up to 7 to 10 days, but we give it 5-day shelf life. So that way people can bring it home and it's still going to last a few days in their fridge. But we find that when we were putting a date on it, that even as it approached the date, people wouldn't buy it. And people would be like, it's going to go out of date in 2 days. I don't want that one. I want the other stuff. So we were finding that we were not wasting a lot of food because anything that reaches the 5 days, we take and we put in the freezer and then we bring to the food shelf. And so someone eventually eats it. But we started using a color coordinated system of the days of the week. So each day of the week has a different color sticker on it. So that way we know how old a food product is, but not necessarily the customers are as aware of it. So we've been we've been able to move a lot more food and keep things moving that way. So it's been kind of fun. I'm gonna add some pasta to here. Another thing we do, I mentioned that we do, collect all of our scraps. We collect scraps from everything. Like when we do our deli, whenever we cut turkey, there's the ends of the meat. We collect those. We'll put them in the freezer and use them in soups. The tomatoes we'll use in, the marinara. Even the cheese ends, we'll save up, put in the freezer, and then when we get enough, we'll go and make a cheese sauce for our bechamel or anything like that. So there's very little that we throw out, and whatever we do gets out of date usually makes its way to the food shelf, which is nice. All right. Let's lower this here. So we want this in a nice little simmer, not a raging boil. And not quite there. All right, well, we can go ahead and start cooking our kale stems. So we'll bring them to the simmer and probably just let them cook for about a minute or so. And while we're doing that, we can get the pesto ready. So you can use either a mortar or pestle or a food processor. I'm sure a food processor might be more common, but the less tech is a mortar and pestle. And again, it really doesn't need, you don't really have to follow a recipe when making pesto. Just kind of use what you have. I had this, it just calls for a hard cheese. This was like a more of an aged cheddar that I had sitting in my fridge that needed to get used up. So I'm going to use that. A couple of cloves of garlic. A couple pinches of toasted walnuts. And what's fun about pestos is that it's a great way for to use up stuff in your garden as well. You know, I've made pestos out of red pepper, out of everything, and he doesn't necessarily. Most people think that, you know, it's basil, pine nuts, garlic, cheese, and that's it. But you can kind of really omit cheese. You can use I've used sunflower seeds if you want to make a nut-free pesto. You know, you don't even have to use anything. Just anything you kind of put in here and mix together and make a nice little sauce works. So we're going to that. We're going to take our lemon. So this is another thing that, you know, if you're going to the store and picking out a lemon, this one's kind of soft. This one might not be the one you go to the store and buy, but, you know, if you're going to use it up that day, or if it's in your fridge, go ahead and use it, because it's just as good as when you bought it. And we're just going to use a little bit of the zest. You don't necessarily have to, but it's really nice. I feel like it gives a really great lemon flavor to anything you're going for. And then we're also going to use some of the juice. Put it through there to catch the seeds. And just some chili flakes. So you can just use regular chili flakes. I have these Asian red pepper powder. This is what I prefer to use. The flakes are a little bit smaller, but just some whatever hot red pepper flakes you have in your cabinet will work. And then a good amount of oil.
Jim, where did you get those red pepper flakes if they were interested?
At any Asian grocery store carry stuff like that.
Okay.
Now you can see, I mean, it just looks like cooked kale stems. Nothing too special about that, but we'll strain it off. Again, they're nice and soft from the baking soda. And we're gonna throw them in here and just blend the whole thing together. Don't forget to stir your pasta. I know, I'm sure you know it's cooked pasta. Just forgotten it. It turns into one big clump at the bottom. Almost forgot it here. I think I saved it. All right, there we go. Just gonna halfway through, you might want to give it a little stir down the sides. That way it's going. Got nice. You can see that there, nice little pesto that'll go well on some pasta. And you can taste it too and add a little seasoning if you'd like. You make sure that there's enough garlic in there. Yeah, it's good. It's not completely. If it was just used as a sauce, you might want a little more salt in there. But because we're going to be putting on seasoned pasta, you don't need quite as much. The pasta's already have taste to it, and this is just going to be a nice little flavor that helps accentuate it. So, all right, pasta's getting there. Now we can go back to our our stew over here. All right. Oh yeah, almost about there. So now we're gonna add our flavorings to it. So I've got some green olives. On the thing it says slice. You can slice them. You can kind of whatever you want to have. Sometimes I put whole olives in there. If people don't like olives, they can pick them out. This is one of those recipes that's really cool because people don't expect olives and then the apricots to go in there. I don't have apricots here. Again, I couldn't go out and pick them up because I can't go to the grocery store right now. So I'm just going to omit them, but definitely put them in there. It's a really great. I think it's one of the things that makes the dish because it gets this little like fruity, savory, sweet, and sour thing going on. It's really great. So definitely, if you have them, put them in there. It really makes the dish. So mix those in, and then we're going to add our Ras Al Hanout. So this is from the Teeny Tiny Spice Company. You can get stuff. I think McCormick makes a version of it. You can buy these at the store, or you can make your own from the list on the second page if you want to put it together. That's just an approximation of one I made at the mill. It's going to be a little bit different than the one here, but they're all going to be really nice and give a nice flavor to the dish. So I'm just going to throw a little bit in there. You can add a little bit more if you really like it, a little bit less. And then just to kind of accentuate it, I add a little bit of cinnamon to this section dish. These Middle Eastern or like African dishes are really kind of see my puppy came in. He's going to join us. Cinnamon is really kind of a great and savory, used in savory things. People aren't expecting it. People might not even notice it being there. Like they'll sense its familiar flavor, but they can't quite pin it because it's not something they're expecting. But because it is kind of a sweet and sour dish, it really goes well. And then once you're there, we're going to taste it, see if it needs a little. I've got a little bit of salt to that, just to kind of salt to my liking. That's good. And then to thicken it up, the tomato paste is what we're going to use to actually thicken the stew and really bring it together, make it a nice, thick and hearty stew. I'm going to have my tomato paste in there. We're ready to go.
Now, Jim, we have a couple of questions coming in. People are wondering what you're adding. And I just want to point out that that's sorry, help me out with the name again.
Ras Al Hanout.
Ras Al Hanout.
That's the Moroccan spice right there that I was talking about. So you can pick that up. You know, around here, the Teeny Tiny Spice Company, you can find that in most grocery stores now. McCormick also makes a version of that as well. But it's just a spice mix that's a Moroccan. It usually consists of turmeric, paprika, ginger, coriander, cumin, cinnamon, nutmeg, black pepper, red pepper flakes, cardamom, allspice, clove, and I'm sure you can find more ingredients in some, and depending on what region you are. You know, it's like a curry. Every region has their own version of it. I think actually this one, I think they actually put, yeah, they got lavender flowers, rose petals. So stuff that you might not be able to find at the grocery store. So I would just go and buy that, or, you know, make your own. It's going to be quite tasty as well.
I made some from the recipe, and it's really nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
It can also,
go ahead, Ann.
I was just going to say, it can also be a lot cheaper to make your own spice mixes. And again, that's something I learned from Jim, like, don't be hesitant to make your own. You can do a great job just with Googling recipes online.
Or if you see it at the store, it usually has the ingredients, so you can just use those. We have another question. Emily wants to know if you recommend chard stems for pesto too, and if you can use chard stems or collards or what.
Yeah, you can use any of that. Chard stems. I mean, a pesto just is Italian for paste. So as long as you cook something and make it into a paste, I made carrot pesto before. You can make cauliflower. You take the cauliflower stems, make cauliflower pesto, broccoli stem pesto. Really just anything you want to like cook down, soften up, and put in a food processor with flavorings. Kind of the sky's the limit. So don't use this recipe as the end all be all. Find stuff in your refrigerator that you want to put in a food processor and make a sauce out of. You can make some really nice stuff out of there. So pasta's all done now. So we're gonna start mixing it up. So I got my noodles in my mixing bowl here. I'm gonna throw in, oops, I forgot to cook the kale stems. I'll just throw some in fresh, it'll be fine. They'll sort of kind of cook down with the hot noodles. And then add my pesto. Just mix that in. And then I would normally add cherry tomatoes for this. Again, I couldn't run to the store and get cherry tomatoes, so all I had was the regular tomatoes. I just diced it up, that's fine as well. And with this, I like to add them in in the pasta and let the pasta just warm up the tomatoes. It's going to be really nice because like the tomatoes aren't going to get quite cooked. They're just going to get warmed through and they won't expel all their liquids, but they'll still have some integrity. But they'll be really still nice and flavorful and fresh. So I'm going to do that, and then we can serve our pasta.
Jim, people are wondering, I think they missed it when you were talking about substitutes for nuts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can substitute sunflower seeds. I've done pepitas or pumpkin seeds. You can just leave the nuts out, no big deal. But yeah, that's what you can just. I mean, pestos are just it's just a paste. So whatever you want to make a paste out of. And so to finish this off and kind of give it a nice little finish, we're going to throw a little crumbled toasted walnuts to accentuate the nuts that we put in there. I'm going to grate a little bit of cheese over the top.
While you're grating, Jim, Gail wants to know about, so she says that when she's at the grocery store, she can only find things in huge quantities and ends up with more food than she needs. So I think what might be helpful to her is some strategies on storing things, maybe breaking them into smaller portions and storing them. Do you have anything you could talk to her about?
Yeah, I mean, I think just using, utilizing your freezer for even stuff, like if you're going to buy, if you can only buy large quantities of, let's say carrots, I mean, peel them, or do whatever you're going to do with them, chop them up and put them in little baggies, almost like flash freeze them. I guess like what other type of ingredients would you thinking of that in large quantities? Yeah.
She also mentioned hamburger and a couple of other things.
Yeah, I mean, hamburger, same thing. You can always just take things, portion it to the size you want it. So if you have to buy a pound of hamburger and you only need like a quarter pound at a time for a little bit of protein here and there, divide it in 4, wrap it up, and put it in some kind of container, and then put it in your freezer. And that way you have a pre-portioned amount of whatever in your freezer ready to go. So yeah, I mean, I think just learning to utilize the freezer as well as you can. Like our freezer is always chock full with everything we can, and we pull stuff as we need it. Every time we break down beef at the market, we always have scraps, and we only get like a pound of, like maybe less than a pound of scrap. And we're gonna, want to use a lot of the time. So like every half a year or so, we go through like, okay, all of our beef scraps, we'll take it out and braise it off and do like a barbecue beef special. So yes, really you're going to use your freezer as optimal as you can is kind of one really great strategy for reducing food waste, I find.
Gail, one more strategy is to use the deli at the grocery store. If there are certain meats that you want, if you just want like a small chunk of ham for a or something like that, the deli can be your friend. And even the prepared foods section too, you can buy like usually a small thing of olives, or just the proportion that you want.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all that stuff is really great. Grocery stores now they're all like they'll have pretty much everything you want in the quantities you need them. So they find, unless you're going to Costco and buying a lot at once, usually you can buy a little amount of anything. So yeah. So here are the two finished dishes. So we got the Moroccan beef and chickpea stew. I put a nice little helping of cilantro on there. Obviously, if you don't like cilantro, you can leave it. And then here's our little pasta dish. A little cheese and nuts, our kale pesto pasta. So hope you enjoyed that.
That looks great. Thanks so much for sharing, Jim. So let's see. Anne, do you want to come back on and we can have a little bit of a longer question and answer session?
Sure.
All right.
Gail, I just thought of one more thing in terms of trying to get smaller portions of things. Like I like to make coleslaw a lot, or like Asian slaw, and those huge cabbages, there's just no way I'm going to use it all. And I'll just take one up to the deli and sometimes say, hey, can you cut this in half? This is all I want. And usually they do it, and they'll just wrap up the other portion and, set that aside and weigh it and put it back out. And then you're doing a favor for somebody else who might also only want half of the cabbage too.
Yeah, that's funny about the cabbage. They're hard to use a whole cabbage when you're feeding a household of two.
Yeah. Sauerkraut's a good option if you're into that. I also like them liked them for cookouts because I would just make a big batch of coleslaw and share it with a lot of people. We have a couple of other questions. Someone's asking if you thaw frozen veggies when you're getting them ready for a stock, or if you just put them right in the pot.
What was that? Sorry, I was reading the Chef Piggy clock message.
Oh,
Chef Piggy with the clock. Yes.
Somebody's admiring the decoration. So Bahati was asking, and I'm not sure if I got that name right, but they're asking if you thaw your frozen veggies that you're going to use for a stock, or if you just put them right in.
If you're all like the frozen like ends and pieces, no, you can just throw them. They'll thaw out in the stock as you heat the stock up. What's nice about freezing vegetables also, it's also a strategy of retaining vegetables that I actually talk about in another food workshop that I do. That's a nutritional cooking workshop. So by freezing vegetables, you're essentially blanching them a little bit. So especially like peas, the frozen peas and corn you get, or fava beans, anything like that. If you freeze them and then thaw them, they're almost slightly cooked. So I find that you can actually just pick them up with like a little bit of butter in a pan, and you don't actually have to fully cook them, so they'll retain more of their vitamins and nutrients, and also have really nice fresh flavor. So call it cryo blanching is kind of the term for it in the cook world. So it's kind of a neat little benefit of freezing things.
Nice. So Jim, what are some of your favorite food scraps to put in your stock freezer bag?
So we'll use any like the celery ends or like the celery butts, like the end. We'll cut off the part with the dirt on it and save like the last little few leaves where they all come together. Then we have to save all the leaves and put those into the bag. Basically, we just have a stock bag. So we'll put celery ends in there. We'll put, like these, like any of the meatier parts of the onion we'll put in there. We don't save the skins. The skins definitely give it more of a bitter flavor to it, but anything with a good amount of meat to it, we'll put in there. We don't put carrot peels in there. I find that anything with peels like that, it'll start to especially if you reduce the stock, you'll start to concentrate that like dirt flavor that the carrot might have on there from the peel. So we don't save the peels. We save any of the butternut squash, like the winter squash. Those peels we do use. They're great. They add a nice amount of sweetness to a stock, especially in the fall. They're a great flavor to it. Corn cobs, they'll go great in the stock. Any herbs, any hard herbs, so like the harder herbs like rosemary, sage, any of those thyme, any of those stems in there, they'll go great in stock. So.
Well, we have a couple of great suggestions in the question box. I think we have some questions in the chat box, so I'm going to open that up and see what we have. So let's see. Somebody's asking how to freeze mint and herbs.
You can freeze mint and herbs. They actually freeze pretty well. They're not going to be, when you pull them out, they're not going to be like quite as vibrant as like when they were fresh, or but they're, anything like basil freezes pretty well. Mint, I don't know. I saw it was specifically for mojitos. It's definitely going to lose a little something in the freezer, but it's going to still work as well. What's nice is that when you freeze the leaves, you can kind of crush. When you pull them out, you can crush them up and then put them in stuff, so you don't actually have to tear them apart or cut them. They can kind of just like go right into any dish you put them in, or any soup or stew.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, but if you have any others, we can stay on for a little longer. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing all this great cooking knowledge with us, Jim, and this all these interesting bits about how much food is wasted and what we can do to work against that. Did you have something else you wanted to say, Anne?
Oh, well, two things in terms of freezing stuff that often goes bad in my fridge. Like whenever I open a can of tomato paste, I usually only need, 1 or 2 tablespoons. And so then it would, I would forget about it and it'd mold in the fridge. So somebody taught me just to take a tablespoon and put it in a little Ziploc bag. And so just freeze them all in little tablespoon portions. You can either do that or put it in ice cube trays. And you can do that with other mints and other herbs too, with a little oil. And then just defrost them and use them with bread.
Yeah, that's funny. I was almost going to mention the tomato paste when I opened it.
Yeah.
I think too, like they have tubes of tomato paste.
Yeah.
Which actually, like if we're at home when you're just using it very infrequently, that's the way to go, because it won't get any mold on it. You just use as much as you need. So.
Yeah.
And if it does get mold on it, I usually scrape it off and go for what's underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing I forgot to mention about freezing is it's a really great habit to make a list of what's in your freezer and the dates, and then just like keep that, on a piece of paper, with a magnet or whatever next to your freezer. Because it's really easy to forget what's in there. And getting ready for this workshop, I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't done that in a while. So I made this big long list, and now I know what I'm going to have for the base of my meals coming up, because you don't want to forget about things in there either.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much concludes it. We're not seeing many more questions come in. I did want to ask everybody to please fill out our follow-up survey that we'll be sending out. We'll send that out with an email. And for those of you who live in the Central Vermont district, you will be entered to win a kitchen food waste reduction kit, which has a couple of nice things in it, a compost pail and a vegetable brush. So you can do that instead of peeling the vegetables like carrots and potatoes like Jim was talking about. So yeah, if you're interested, please let us know how we did. Let us know any feedback you have. Do either of you have anything you want to add to wrap up here?
One last thing, the state last year, we developed a new website, scrapfoodwaste.org, and check that out. It has some tips on there that we talked about tonight. And we're also going to be updating that within the next probably 6 to 8 months. So check back for more tips and maybe recipes and things like that.
Okay, great. And we will be sending out the recording of this video, of this webinar. We'll be sending out these recipes if you didn't get them the first time around. And we'll be sending out some of those resources that Ann talked about. All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. We really enjoyed this, this cooking webinar. And have a good rest of your night. Enjoy the dinner that you've made.
All right, take care, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.